You can perfect your strategy, refine your systems, and optimize your operations. But if you ignore culture, you will fail. Because leadership isn't about structures, it's about understanding people. And nowhere is that more evident than in an international context. In this episode, I'm joined by Simon Herbert to explore what international leadership teaches us about navigating national cultures, shaping school communities, and understanding the human dynamics that sit beneath it all. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast with me, Juliet Corbett. I'm a trusted advisor, executive coach and strategist, working with accomplished leaders who are navigating complex challenges, the kind that can feel like a tangled ball of string, confusing, frustrating, and hard to unpick. In this new series, I bring you real-world conversations with principals, heads and CEOs of independent and international schools. Together, we explore problem-solving in uncertainty, staying strategic amidst the daily bustle of leadership, and building high-performing teams. Today, I'm joined by Simon Herbert FRSA, Director of the IB curriculum at GEMS Education and a school leader with more than 30 years of experience across France, Kenya, Scotland, China and the UAE. Simon has held senior leadership roles at Fettes College in Edinburgh and at Dulwich College, Beijing, where he served as headmaster during a period when the school received international recognition. He moved to Dubai in 2020 to lead GEMS International School. And he now oversees IB provision across the GEMS group of more than 50 schools. So that breadth of experience gives him a really distinctive perspective on leadership across different cultures. And that's what we dive into in this episode. We look at culture at multiple different levels. So we look at what it takes to understand the national culture, the national context, before then leading within it. We also think about school culture and how you can't command that. You have to nudge it and curate it over time. And then we also reflect on the human dynamics beneath all culture. Trust, psychological safety, and the everyday behaviours that quietly shape whether a community thrives. So in this conversation, we're diving into complexity, authenticity, and the discipline of protecting culture while strategy and operations continue to evolve. So let's get into my conversation with Simon Herbert. Simon, welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Fantastic to have you here with us.
Thank you very much indeed, Juliet, for the invitation. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation. So let's start by learning a little bit more about you. What was it that made you want to enter the career of education? Where does that root of the passion for what we do come from, do you think?
Oh, goodness. Without giving a huge answer, I think it starts from, it's a bit of a cliche, but some of the best teachers that taught me, I thought that was really, really amazing that they're putting across their passion for their subject. I didn't initially want to go into teaching. Actually, I went overseas as part of my university course to France for a year, and I was in a school as a lycée technique as an English assistant and found I really enjoyed the atmosphere there. Ended up finishing at university, going abroad to Kenya for a year, doing a little bit of teaching there. Loved that, but still was fighting against it, still fighting against going down this road of teaching. I ended up going into marketing and advertising for a while. And as much as I did enjoy that world, especially the sort of the psychology of it to some extent, I looked at what I've been doing with teaching and I looked at marketing advertising. I thought, in 10 years' time, am I going to look back and think, well done me, I've raised the share points for Mars Bar. Or French soap powders, as it was. I was the expert on French soap powders. Ask me anything.
Important. Yeah.
No, not. And I thought, no. And I came to sort of a crux in my career. I got a teaching job offer, and I got an offer within the marketing world. So it was that point I thought, no, I'll go back into teaching. And I never looked back after that. I really loved it. Loved the teaching environment, the buzz of a school, all the experts around you. Students keep you young as well, I think. And then just sort of transmitting a love of languages as well was fun.
So interestingly, the education, the teaching bubbled along and came a little bit to the surface in terms of where you were going to go a little bit later. But the thing that was right there at the beginning was the international exposure, the idea of taking some time in France, the languages, the cultures, immersing yourself in things beyond the UK. That came first, actually.
Yes, it did. And I mean, I was lucky that it sort of merged with education at the same time. But I was I think, being in a lycée technique, I was completely on my own, as it were. There was the only English person there. It was down in the southwest of France. It was a lovely place in the Lot, if anyone knows it, in Cahors. Very nice wine. Not that I indulge too much, of course, during my working day. But although back in the day, the French did have wine at lunchtime in the staff room. Anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah, they did. They sort of frown at you if you didn't have any. And so I loved that, but I really enjoyed, although it was very hard work, as it were, learning the language. I knew the written language, I could kind of read Molière or whatever, but I couldn't speak French, couldn't understand what they were saying. So that was the year to really get into that. And what was really interesting was not only learning another language in depth, but was looking at your own country in a different way. Obviously still loving where you're from, but seeing it as other people through other people's eyes. And I think that's been useful for me ever since in my career, dealing with international parents, other places that I've been, just seeing, yes, I'm from the UK. I'm not the apologist defender of the UK. Of course, I will be to some extent, but just seeing it how others might see it. Just as now, having been in China, China for 8 years, seeing how China is always portrayed in the media.
So it's seeing through different eyes and seeing things that if you stay in one place, you don't get to see. You're physically moving, but it's more important that you're moving between different cultures and different sets of media, different understandings of social environments where you're having conversations. You're seeing different countries through different lenses each time.
You're talking to, and even though, if you use France as an example, attitudes can be quite entrenched. On both sides. You only 20 miles in the channel, but it's unbelievable. And so I was there at the time, actually, when I was there, I remember this conversation that somebody was saying, England's just full of football hooligans, isn't it? Now, that's because it was in the news at the time. Yeah. And so I found myself saying, it's not just that, you have lots of other things to see. And I did find that I was often asked to talk about the UK by those people in France who didn't know it so well. Actually, just on that note, to sort of another anecdote, is when I was flying back from Beijing, I was flying back and it was the time of the Brexit vote. And I was flying on Air France and the steward said to me, he said, oh, you're an English guy and you speak French. Oh, brilliant. Can I ask you please about Brexit? So I found myself having this sort of geopolitical conversation and, looking at that but for me personally, as somebody who's traveled a lot, international, I was quite despondent by what had happened. So anyway, I was able to put across to him my views. But yeah, it's nice to be able to do that. But as you say, to see the world through slightly different eyes. Yeah. I've been very lucky in my career. I was very lucky as a young man to go to Kenya. I applied through the British Council, just kind of lobbed off CVs, and one came back, and I got a phone call from a headmaster in Kenya, and I'd spent a year there, and again, was a wonderful thing to do. So, even now I see sort of African friends here in Dubai, and I have something to chat to them about to some extent.
Some of this is about the transitions, I wonder, as well, between these different geographic locations. As you make those transitions, we've got Scotland, we've got south of France, we've got Kenya, we've got Beijing, and now UAE. Have you noticed that each time you've transitioned from one to another, there's a period of adjustment where you're seeing things fresh, and then it settles into more like this is normal again, and then everything adjusts again at the next transition? Is that how it feels? No,
I think you're right. There is this sort of element, if you've read Third Culture Kid, can't remember who the author is now, it's a really good book, that there are elements of that. I think it gets easier the more international you are, as it were. If if you're staying international, it really does become, where are we going next? And we know we can adjust as a family. We know we can do that. My boys are very resilient. Helen, my wife, teaches as well and has worked in lots of places. So you do as a family become more resilient, or used to the change. The change is going to happen. I think the big one for us, I was going to say from London to Edinburgh actually, but That was for my family. I thought that was shocking that I could go so far. But Edinburgh is a beautiful place. And I was very lucky to be in a really, really nice school. But it was a standalone school. So the change that I had there was, number one, was going somewhere like Beijing, and secondly, to a group of schools. So it's a sort of double whammy. And the other thing is, I think that in life, there are, at the moment, you could say there are two different types of international teacher and leader. Some are those who want to be comfortable, want to go to somewhere comfortable, preferably English speaking, home from home, sort of thing. And we weren't really like that. We thought, actually, we don't want to go to Hong Kong, even though we've been to Hong Kong many times, since it's beautiful, or Singapore. We want to go somewhere actually which we don't know, people don't know so well, and it really is, if you like, true China. And Beijing, certainly back then, was very much like that. But anyway, I loved it, and I thought that my friends in Edinburgh, including in my school, they were in two camps. One of which was said, "What on earth? What on earth are you doing? Why would you leave this beautiful place, Edinburgh? Why would you? There's everything for your family here." And there was another half who said, "Oh, fantastic! Well played to you. This is brilliant." And I think I was on the cusp of those teachers and leaders moving overseas in the early cusp of that, as it were. Whereas nowadays, you read all the time, there's many people looking to leave UK, and sadly, in many ways, and just head off rather, you might say, very early in their career, but it's almost the norm now, whereas back then it wasn't, certainly not to Beijing. So it's a big time difference, and then there's definitely a culture shock, so that takes some getting used to. And I think, Juliet, there are certain things that you accept as preferable in that place, as it were, things you're enjoying doing together. We probably remained closer as a family than we would have done, you see, because our children relied on us even more, and we're sort of a really tight group. And you get to know other people really well, the other expats who are there, as well as, obviously, Chinese people. And that was, for me, when I look back at my time in China now, it's the local staff. I love the expats they were with, but the local staff made it. That's what, it's the real China, and we got to know them really well. So yes, so I think it's what you put into it. It's the old kind of cliche, what you put into something. But there is a culture shock, and there are positives from it, and the negatives. The negatives are you miss some really big occasions back in the UK, for family or friends, special occasions. You just have to realise as an international teacher leader that you're unable to just drop everything and go back.
What comes to mind is the way in which this way of thinking about a career as being largely location independent. We're not moving every month. Some people might do that, but when we've got children especially, we're rooting ourselves deeply into a place, but knowing that isn't the boundary of where we need to be forever. There is other opportunities that we could move to at some point. And it's, you mentioned that it gets easier to some extent, the transitions from one location to another. And that's because I think we train ourselves to get used to change. So even though the next change might be different to the one we've experienced in the past, what we've done is we've become more resilient in understanding what change impacts and what change doesn't impact. So the thing that isn't being impacted is your identity as a leader, or your identity as a family group, or something about the hobby that you have. Not everything shifts and changes each time. You take those things with you. And yet the more we get used to putting ourselves a bit beyond the comfort zone into that stretch zone, and here we're talking about geographic moves, it could be a different element of change, but we're actually practicing getting really good at uncertainty, at complexity, at change.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it reflects on your children. We have 3 boys, and I mean, I've heard many other people who are international say the same thing, that even though your children initially, they'll be hit by a bit of sadness when a friend leaves, it will happen quite often, because there's that sort of transitory nature of international work sometimes. And obviously they'll grab onto a friend and hope that friend stays, but they will make friends pretty rapidly as well. They will learn to do that and come to a new place, and they will seek people out. And I think is pretty good for their resilience. And of course, in some ways, you'd love to have friends for life through your whole school, as we did, well, I did, go all the way through school. And you don't have that. But on the other hand, my sons have been in the same classroom with such a variety of different nationalities, different cultures, understanding where they come, and just being mates together. They don't always worry about where anyone's from. It's just all mates together, and then they find out later, and it's culturally enriching. So I do think it's a lot of fun, but it's also it can be some tough times. I mean, China. One little anecdote about China is that, which people don't understand maybe, is that China is such a fun place as well. I initially I thought, oh my goodness, we knew this for sure. There's a member of the Communist Party in every school, has to be, and you have to be a little bit careful what you say sometimes. But actually, Beijing is pretty. You wouldn't believe it's such a capitalist place, out there, and what I love about China is that if you do something for someone, you just do it naturally for someone. They will repay you in spades. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah. I remember being overseas. We talked about Dulwich. It's a wonderful group. Some really good people. Had a lovely time there, and very grateful for that opportunity. I remember being with all the leaders once. I was somewhere like Thailand, or it could have even been Dubai. And we'd come to one of these sort of professional development weekends, have a bit of a nice time at the same time. And I got a call, and if he's ever going to listen to this, he'll remember this. The CEO of Dulwich was called Christian Gertler, a Swiss German guy. He's a really nice guy, and he loved the schools, and he understood the culture of the different places as well. And he said he wasn't at this particular gathering. He phoned me. So I'm with all the other principals. I'm sort of having a meal at the end of the day, and he said, "Simon, can you come back to Beijing?" And I said, "What? But you know where I am. I've been looking forward to this for ages. Why?" He said, "Look, please just do me this favor." And I said, "Well, what on earth is it?" And he said, "Well, there's a 10K run being organised by the district where your school is, by the landlord. Do you know the landlord?" I said, yeah, I know the landlord. He said, "Well, he's wanting to get some expats and international people in that run because it doesn't look good right now, because it was the area of Beijing meant to be the most international. There's no one international in the run." He said, "Could you come and do it and get some people from your school?" I said, "But Christian, it's Sunday morning. I'm going to have to fly back now." And he said, "Yes, please, I'll owe you one." And I said, "Well, okay, how am I going to get people from my school?" He said, "Well, just buy them dinner. I'll let you do that." So anyway, I was promising all sorts to the staff, and I got 15 of us. We ran this thing, and I'm not joking. All of the local dignitaries, they loved us forevermore. They really did. They never forgot it. And I was known as friend of China from then on by these guys.
So what that tells us.
So thank you, Christian. I missed out on a good weekend if you're listening.
But it worked out in the end, right? So what this tells you, well, the lesson I'm drawing from this is that, especially international cultures, they can look a little bit like there's tensions and contradictions that don't quite make sense. This is a communist country, and let us looking quite capitalist on the surface. So things about this culture just don't quite match my expectation. And that's what we do when we move into a new culture, is things don't look like they make sense. It's always the case moving to a new school, even within the same geography. And what you do then is you understand that culture is always a group of humans creating a way of being. This is the way we do things around here. It's the informal definition of a culture.
Yes.
So what you're then exploring is that there are individuals who are, and it always happens in a lot of Asian cultures, where they're trading favors in a way that's much more formal than we often do, certainly in the UK. And that give and take, the reciprocal nature of the social relationship develops over time. So things don't often happen quickly. These relationships get deep over time. Yes. But there is a trust that it's not literally, you do this and I'll do this, I'll scratch your back. It's not an agreement in advance, but it's a trust in the reciprocal nature of that culture. And so it's that actually binds those cultures together. So I think what we're hearing from that anecdote is a great example of how a culture may look a little bit strange or mysterious, or really can't understand it initially. But if you can understand the human dynamics, that's when you start to understand, okay, this makes sense. I'm getting to understand this now.
You've put that very well. Yeah, absolutely. And you get to a deeper level then.
Exactly.
And I think you're right. I do think you're right that in the Asian cultures, with that reciprocal arrangements, they run far deeper, and it does take longer. And you're also right about things taking longer. And without mentioning any sort of nationalities who head over to China and try and start up a business just because they're powerful or have some money, that's not going to work. It's going to take a while to get to know people.
Yeah.
I was lucky to be on the British Chamber of Commerce while I was there. I was sort of the educational rep on there. And it was a privilege to be, because the people on there, they actually understood it. They'd been in Beijing a long time. They knew how partnerships worked. They knew how to behave and not just make friends, but proper business partners based on trust and intercultural awareness. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I learned that lesson early on when I was fundraising for Cambridge University. I was fundraising from all over the world, high net worth people that I was meeting, getting multi-million pound donations. And one of the best lessons in philanthropy came from a medical professor who happened to come from China, who really helped me to understand over informal lunches at high table, this is how the culture works. This is what no one had told me, like in my development training. No one had told me this stuff, but he was the way that I understood this is how the culture works. And I would often go to him about not just how to frame the next step of a relationship, because normally I understood that quite instinctively. It was more about the timing that he helped me with. Like, are we ready yet for this? Like, I know what the next step or the next 3 steps are going to be, but how do I what time frame are we working on here? That's where I was getting it wrong. I was going way too fast. And he was, no, slow down. You're right. That's for 6 months' time. Now we need to do this first. That was an amazing lesson in understanding the deep cultural kind of way of being in that part of the world. And of course, since then, having worked with people in Latin America, having worked with people in North America, every culture has its own set of rules. It's not that Asia's unusual in this, but it is about understanding the human dynamics that we can miss if we just look at cultural level from afar.
Yes. So I think in your point about transitions, that I've been lucky is just sort of fortunate in my life to have been in other places, and therefore I don't join a school as Mr. UK, as it were. I mean, obviously I do initially to people. They see me with my whatever suit and tie or something, and they might think, oh, this guy's very British. But then it doesn't take long for them to think, oh, he's quite interested in our culture as well. I mean, we had 100 different nationalities in the school in Dubai. So just the pure fact of moving from Beijing to Dubai in some ways couldn't be more different, when Beijing is very Chinese, as I said, and that sounds really obvious, but how do you say Dubai is very what? Is very Emirati? No, it's not. I mean, it's only 10%. So coming to somewhere where 90% of the people in a country are expats, who's just thinking about that. And also where, you've got the UK media about Dubai. And that's, if I say the word bling, if I say the word, shallow and transparent, bling or whatever, that's what a lot of people are going to think.
Assumptions that we're making, yeah.
Well, 36% of the people in Dubai are Indian. Major number of schools are British and Indian, then a lesser number are American. I was running a 4-program IB school. And you've got a hugely, not quite so much now, but transitory population. So that alone. But again, you come to a school, and if you are willing to, obviously got to do some listening, and you've got to see the different layers of culture within the school. And then I think you have to be quite strong as to what you would like, what you see as important to you and the school. It's got to come from that school community as well. But if hopefully respect and trust is big for them, then you play on that really, really big time. You try and model that. We did that at the school I was in Dubai, which was, as I say, it's very important geopolitically as well. You've got all sorts of things that can be happening, and you've got to make sure that the school maintains, if you like, the positive culture for everybody. In the sense of what the IB wants: inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people are going to make a difference, help the world. So I think I was lucky in the fact that I had already been international before coming here and running a big school with 2,000 something students and 100 nationalities. But on one occasion I lived in France. I love speaking French, so I learned French at university, and I learned some Spanish later. And just a few words in that language to somebody. I remember I'd just gone to the bathroom, actually, and this French guy, I just chatted to him, and he didn't know I could hear him, and he was on his phone around the corner. He said to him, "Do you know what?" And he was speaking French to his wife. He said, "Do you know what? even the principal speaks French. We've got to come here and tell our mates. I was thinking, oh, yes, it's going to go down well.
I love it.
But yeah.
But it's the signal. I wonder as well whether it's as soon as you break one assumption that someone's made about you or about your institution, your organisation, they start to then question the other assumptions. So as soon as you've broken the assumption of Simon Herbert, principal, he's a Brit, full stop, that's it. Hang on a minute, he's a Brit that speaks French and Spanish. He's a Brit who came here from Beijing. Like, as soon as you break a couple of assumptions, then people are more likely to say, what else have we assumed about him that we weren't actually sure about? They might not do it consciously, but subconsciously, that's when they're more open to seeing something that's different.
Yeah, and I haven't really found that bit too hard. I mean, maybe initially. I think as soon as you're yourself and you have a bit of fun, you got to have a bit of fun in your work as well, and sort of try to be, this dreadful word, kind of authentic in your leadership, but really, as much as possible, trying to be yourself, whether it's with your leadership team or whether it's, middle leaders, teachers and parents, and the students, of course, otherwise they'll see through you. So there is that, there's my own how people see me, and my own sort of the perception that people have. But then in a big school, it's probably the families and how they view each other. Quite often in a school, especially a quickly growing school, you'll have the existing families, as they're called, been there a massive 5 years or something, who think of themselves as, well, I was here from the start. And you know what, Simon? Those new families, they just don't understand. Yeah. And they're rough. They're just new money or rough or whatever it is they're going to say. Yeah. And you have to try and group them all together, as it were, and break down those barriers. So find things that they have in common and try and beyond just school events, just the messaging from the school, try and break those barriers and have people enjoy other cultures as well,
Yeah. Again, it's the human dynamic. We often talk about culture, and we're talking about culture on different levels here. We're talking about kind of a national culture, but we're also talking about school culture. But underneath that is all of the ways that humans in groups work. And so it's natural, to some extent, for a lot of people to be a kind of a them and us. We're the old guard. We've been here forever. They're coming in, and doing this, that, and the other, and it's not right. Whatever the language that's used around that, it's natural for us to create a them and us group as humans. It's kind of what we're evolutionarily evolved to do. So what you can do as a leader is to nudge the culture in a direction that helps people to break down those assumptions, break down those barriers. And what I find fascinating about culture is that because it's so intangible, school culture, you can try and describe it. You've got to really be there to feel it because it's so intangible. As a leader, all you can really do is nudge it in the direction you want to take it in. And some of that's role modeling. Some of that will be a strategic project, a particular event or a particular kind of project that you're putting in place to role model or to nudge the culture in a particular direction. All different ways you can do it, but you can't, as a leader, actually directly change culture.
You can't say, this is what I want, let's do it. You have to, some things may come from the community. If you said, look, let's have 3 words that sum us up as a school. We did actually do that. We did that in Dubai. 3 words. Because when I first went into the school, I asked people this and they come up with 13, 11, 12, 13. And I thought, this is not great. We're never going to remember. Let's try and narrow it. So you can do that to some extent. And fortunately, they came up with respect and trust. I slid ambition in there as well. I was a bit sneaky.
That's your prerogative as a leader.
I did.
Know
I slid,
where
I
you're
slid
heading.
That in. I said that was very popular as well. But I think it's also, it's things like you can obviously deliberately manipulate and manufacture, and people see that. They can say, for example, why not use your current parents, as it were, to help the new parents? Why not, deliberately try and get them together and say, well, you can buddy mentor with somebody else from sometimes the same nationality, maybe not. Somebody else from Portugal who's been here 6 years could link in with, and there we are. And you do the same thing with students, like that vertical articulation. Instead of, some schools can be very, very horizontal, and the kids know each other in their own cohort. But the best schools have natural leadership, not just, I don't mean a bunch of school prefects, I mean just loads and loads of different leadership, preferably vertical. And getting those kids who really love the school and your best ambassadors to link in with the new students as well. So there we are. You're sort of beginning to solve it through that. And then it's sort of almost organic events that can happen, or or visible things that you can put in your newsletter, such as the amazing things students do, like, going and doing research into hospitals. This happened in Beijing. We researched into hospitals and how children's murals would affect recovery rates in children's hospitals.
Interesting.
And linked in with a hospital, and then went ahead and did it. Put Chinese and British fairy stories on the walls. And, but so parents then see that, and that's actually modelling. That's modelling something. Yeah. That's modelling, respect and trust for each other, risk-taking for students. And so I think those sort of things help the culture. It's the not so obvious elements that arise organically, as it were.
Yeah, and it's no, because the 3 words or the 5 values, or a small number of things that people can memorise. You've then planted in people's minds, when that opportunity emerges, I'm going to take it. You don't have to then actually create all the opportunities yourself as leadership, but you're training people and getting them to see, oh, okay, this project that's emerged from the pupils, this is a great example of, one of our 3 words or one of our 5 values, whatever it might be.
Exactly.
And then you showcase it as such.
Yes.
And so you're not necessarily needing to create all the momentum. It's not top down in terms of the momentum, but by creating a framework and then a bit of guidance and encouragement for staff in particular, you're helping them to then identify what's already happening.
Exactly. It's a bit cunning, I guess, in some ways, because you're saying, okay, this is coming through. Oh, that shows respect. Let's use that. But it's true. And why not have a behavioural policy, which then, positive affirmations, etc., not just sanctions and punitive, and then, oh, well, look, we respect and trust, etc.
That sounds strategic rather than cunning.
It's a bit strategic. It's a bit strategic, let's say. But yes, I think, and it's like risk-taking, which is one of the IB's, learner profile. And if you're going to be an IB school, how do you do it? Actually, and it's not just a leader saying, right, here's a poster, we're now risk-taking. It's the leadership actually saying to that member of staff who wants to try something and they're not that sure it's going to work, to let them try it, right? And if it fails, it fails. But then the students will see that, and again, they'll have the same culture.
Yeah, so there's the role modelling there as well. But it's also understanding the human dynamic behind. So risk-taking is great as a label of the type of thinking or the type of behaviour that we're appropriate risk-taking. What we're actually looking at is the human dynamic of psychological safety. So it's the sense of, do people feel safe enough to take a risk?
Yes.
Do they know that if it doesn't work, it's not going to blow back negatively on them?
Exactly.
So it's understanding more deeply how groups of humans work in order to actually nudge the culture in the direction you want. For example, risk-taking, if that's what you're wanting to increase.
I find it fascinating. His name now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just thinking, I can't remember his name now, and this is really bad. I'll look it up later. Of a head in UK who gave permission to fail cards, and everyone got one. I thought that's a really nice idea, But I think if you take it to the classroom level, risk-taking for many students is just putting your hand up, is saying something and not being, I don't mean shouted down by a teacher, but just sort of being given that chance to speak. And it's therefore then training the teachers in PD to allow that kind of atmosphere. Yeah,
exactly. And that behaviour, of course, is all the way through the school. We often talk about this in terms of the school community, but it's the same behaviours that we're looking for in the pupils in the classroom, the staff, in the way they're leading the classroom and the way they're working with their peers, all the way through to the parent body, all the way through to senior leadership, and then whatever governance or kind of management structure you've got above that. And it's making sure that there's some consistency as far as possible. It'll look different in different places, but it's when you get that culture that feels like it's one culture with little subcultures that have a different flavour to them, but it's coherent as one place. That's when a school can really thrive. And in actual fact, sometimes some of the hardest conversations I've had with heads or principals have been when they've realised that they need to start being a bit unattractive to certain types of parent because that isn't the culture they want. And it's almost like we need to now be brave enough to take the risk to actually, be really unattractive to people, because they're the people that don't fit. It's not a great family fit. And then it causes all sorts of difficulties later because there isn't that sense of cohesiveness within the school culture.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, there's so many parent stories we could talk about.
I was going to say there was a nervous laugh that you shared a few minutes. I'm not going to go into that. Laugh. We are recording.
No. I do remember one guy coming into my office, and he was from a place in Europe, okay, and he said, "Look, I'm paying for this and this and this." Unfortunately, our swimming pool had been out of action for a little while, so I did feel a bit sorry for him, because he said, "Well, I've paid my fees, and I'm not getting this and this and this." But then I thought he went on and on. He went too far, and as I sat there, I thought, you're not paying any tax in Dubai, right? So I said to him, "Yes, look, I do understand, but you do realise we have to take some fees from parents, to give you great educated children a great education with facilities and everything else. And I understand the pool's been out of action, but you're not paying any tax, are you?" And he said, "Well, no," because he kept talking about where he'd come from before, right? And they paid loads of tax in that country, and I know that. And then he said, and I said, "Well, look, if you give me your tax money, then I'll put it into fees." That's effectively what's happening, right? You're paying fees instead of tax. And he said, "Oh, I see. Yeah, I see your point. Okay." But
different lens to see it through.
What I mean, it is a different lens, because a European parent might see it that way, and somebody else, who's been in independent education internationally for a long time wouldn't, might see it totally differently. Yeah.
Interesting. And a lot of this comes down to the human dynamics. I know I keep saying that. I'm going to have to look at the transcript to see how many times I've used the word human dynamics in this episode, but it comes down to how we operate as groups, how we operate within our own identity, and helping people to understand that if we're trying to lead a shifting school culture, if we're trying to understand a geographic culture that we're moving into, the common thread is being more human, which is what it means to be authentic, be more yourself, and really get curious and try to understand how the other people around you are really operating. What's driving them? What assumptions are they making? What ways can I shift my way of thinking about this particular challenge that we might be facing together?
I think
how can I help them to shift their assumptions too?
Well, I love that. I mean, I have to say, we were talking about at the beginning about my passion for teaching and international work. And I think part of that is working with some brilliant people, experts from all around the world. They are not, I happen to be from Britain, but my management team, when I first moved to Dubai, I was the only English guy on there. And there was Canadian, American, Lebanese, and so on. And I love hearing their different angle. And this could be an angle. This could be a perspective on anything. This could be a perspective on school uniform, for example. Yeah. Just take that one. How does school uniform equal rigor? And I've been on stages in Dubai where British heads, they'll say, "Well, we're from British schools, and it's rigor. It's all about rigor." And I said, "What do you mean? What do you actually mean by rigor?"
Yeah.
And then they may say, "Well, it's good manners," and and I said, "Well, we have good manners as well." And so it's uniform, and when it comes down to it, it's actually not an academic rigor as such. It's just a perception. I once we're talking about the science and art of leadership, and that those difficult things, the sort of intangible, the cultural, and as you've said, the shifting culture, and how do you put a focus on that? And I remember once being told, Simon, running a school it's not complex, it's not rocket science. That was by somebody who had never run a school. And actually I thought later, I know from the outside it may not seem complex, but actually that's the point of it, the science and art. It's easy to do the science bit. It's easy to put, enough teachers equals this ratio, or let's get a swimming pool, let's have, the operational. But it's the underlying cultural strength of a school, which is hard to define. And there's still much research on it now. Just reading something brilliant by Evidence-Based Education, really good on modelling school environment and leadership, worth a read.
Yeah.
And they themselves are brilliant. They said, "Look, we're still looking for more evidence for this. Yeah. Please share your experiences," because those complexities underlying, especially when you do have a transitory school with 100 nationalities or so, it can be. You've got to have a strong school culture yourself, so that they understand what they're coming to.
Running a school shouldn't be complex. Running a school is always complex because there are humans involved. And when you've got a couple of thousand humans or more in a larger group, you're going to create complexity. regardless. It's not like you're running a system that you can optimize. If it was some kind of manufacturing system where we can optimize the manufacturing process, it doesn't work like that. We might think it works like that. And there are elements, timetabling, whatever it might be, which can be quite operational, and you can just get it right or you get it wrong. You should figure it out. But normally there isn't a single right answer, because this isn't complicated, it's complex. And so we learn over time how to best optimize and run the whole complex system. But you're not always going to get it right, which is why the permission to fail cards, brilliant, absolute genius, because we will not always get it right. Simon, as we wrap up our conversation today, what's one thing that you really would like school leaders to take away from our conversation around how to think about or how to lead school cultures?
I guess a couple of things. Keep an eye on it. Actually, when I said it, you can be dragged in so many different directions. All the school leaders listening to this will understand when I say, we cannot be a perfect 360, and yet that's the feedback we get. Let's do a 360 on you, and you will always fall short somewhere, right? You buff that up, but always play to your strengths. So that's one thing. Play to your strengths, and we've talked about culture a lot. Don't forget it. Keep a really, really good eye on it. Yourself, be authentic, enjoy your work, and then you will be more authentic anyway. But don't, because things change so quickly within schools, the culture doesn't have to. The strategy, of course, does. Strategy, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you've got to move quickly with that. Be astute and agile. But if you have that strong underlying culture, don't let it go. Really pay attention to it. All the things we've talked about in this podcast, that's events, that's bringing in parents, that's bringing in voices of students, vertical alignment. It's what you do. It's the organic stuff, it's the risk taking. Whatever your culture is, but really, really, almost, I want to say it's probably going too far. Have it on every agenda. Have something, cultural on every agenda. As people are meant to have safeguarding, and that's true. But safeguarding is important as a system, and it's got to be there, and it's worth always reminding yourself of it. Well, safeguarding and well-being are certainly helped by a strong bedrock of culture.
I would say that's not taking it too far. In fact, I would say a really interesting experiment would be to say for a whole term or even a whole year, if at the end of every senior leadership team meeting, there needs to be a bullet point about how does what we've discussed affect culture? Even though it's retrospective at the end, rather than being an agenda item you've determined beforehand, what that will do will mean that you'll consistently have your attention on it. And what you're saying is don't take it for granted, because if it's great, it won't automatically stay that way. And if it's not optimal at the moment, however many strategies you put in place, the culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? However many strategies you put in place, however clever you are, it's going to get consistently undermined by that culture. So I think it's a great idea. I challenge people to have a go. See how it goes, let me know. Simon, thank you so much for your time today. Fascinating conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Talk again soon.
Thank you, Juliet.
Thank you for listening to the Independent School Podcast. If you found today's conversation valuable, I invite you to join my email list and hear more of my fresh thinking on leading strategically through complexity and uncertainty. Visit www.consultjuliet.co.uk/sign-up. Remember, the biggest challenges you face are rarely solved by working harder. They're solved by thinking differently, with the right trusted advisor in your corner. While I work with leaders across many sectors, my heart and more than 2 decades of experience remain deeply rooted in education. If you're ready to turn complexity into progress, sharpen your focus, and lead a happier, higher performing team, I'd love to start a conversation about how we could work together. Just reach out anytime. And don't forget, the clearest insights often appear when you gift yourself a moment to slow down and let your best thinking surface.